Okay, I'd like each and every one of you to this budget workshop of May 28, 2019. Also a special call meeting of the Board of Trustees of the San Felipe Doriel CISD. We welcome everyone in attendance. Madam Secretary, would you call roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Contreras.
Present.
Mrs. Guanajuato Webb. Mrs. Haynes Sanders. Mr. Mesa.
Here.
Mr. Oberfelt.
Present.
Mr. Smith. Myself. Sir, we have a quorum.
We have a quorum of 4 board members, only 3 board members that are out. We do have a quorum. This meeting was duly called in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. At this time, we have opening ceremonies, which first we'll start with a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please stand? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item that we have is we're starting with item 3, school board workshop. Item A, Tas B Salary Study. Idea Garcia.
Mr. President,
yes.
Members of the board, as part of the introduction to the salary study, I asked Mr. Arredondo to put together an interpretation of House Bill 3 and the impact, because up to this point, we have been working on possibilities of what House Bill 3 would fund and what they would mandate. Now that it's been passed, we have had limited time to study it, but we still have what we believe is a close indication. So if it pleases the board, I'd like to have Mr. Arredondo introduce the Tas B Salary Study by just telling us how much money we can expect to see from the legislature and how they're mandating that we spend some of it in salaries.
Any objections? Hearing none, we'll hear Mr. Arredondo.
Good evening, President Mesa, board members, Dr. Rios. Okay, first we wanted to start with the House Bill 3 and how it affects our basic allotment.
Can you expand it to the slideshow version so we can see it? That's a little bit better.
Currently, in the basic allotment, we have 5,140. Then in the adjustment allotment, which is a factor or a component that is increased due to the cost of education index, we receive 5,614.
There you go.
Okay, so the basic allotment is 5,140. We receive through a cost of education index an increase of 5,614. That's what we currently receive. So 2019, 2020, the basic allotment is going to increase to 6,160, but they're going to do away with the cost of education index increase. That difference, well, the total for that would be $52,932,880. Now, the difference between the basic allotment and the that we receive, the 5,614, and the 6,160 is $546 times the forecasted ADA of 8,593. That's what we're building into our forecast model. This turns out to be an increase of $4,691,778, of which 30% of this increase needs to be used on non-administrative pay increases, which would be a total of $1,407,533. 75% of that is for teachers, librarians, counselors, and nurses, which is a total of $1,055,650. 25% for other non-administrative employees, $351,883. I wanted to plant that there before I went into the next slide, which is the revenue slide.
Mr. Round, before we go, can I ask you a question here on the weighted ADA? Is that the lowest amount we've had here in the previous years?
Well, yeah, this excludes the special education and CTE students.
So that's not weighted ADA. This is just our ADA. Now, that number that we're using, what's the number, Henry? 8,000?
8,593.
Okay. I see. Amy, what number have we used in the past to calculate ADA at this time in the budget process? Okay, and we're using.
The House bill asks us to remove, it says take the ADA and then remove your special ed and your CTE. So that's why it brings it down to 85.92.
Okay. Right, so this one, that's why it's so much lower because of that, sir.
I noticed that it was substantially low.
Yeah.
Okay, that explains. Thank you.
So at the end of the day, even though it appears that the state is increasing the basic allotment for student by almost $1,000, the reality is that because of that cost of education index that we already received and is going to go away, at the end of the day, we end up getting approximately half of that.
That's correct.
Of an increase, which is still a substantial increase of an additional $4 million per year. That's very significant for us because in the past, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we got as much as $50,000 more. So now going from $50,000 more to $4 million plus is very significant. Of course, a part of that has to go for increases. Thank you, Mr. Olama. Next slide.
So the next slide is the revenue slide, and it has the column with the current law the way it is,
That's one that was just handed to y'all, please.
and it has a column to the right, the proposed HB3. So the components that we modified here on 5710 tax collections, under current law would be $22,524,000. Under the new law would be $20,760,794. And what's happening there is the component that takes care of the tax compression. That has changed. When we bring this back to you on June 27th, I believe, we'll have the revenue details and the expenses that go with this. Now, the next component is the State Aid 5812 FSP Formula Foundation. Under current law, would be $61,214,373. Under the new law, it would be $71,135,804. And if you look at the very bottom, under the where it says general fund revenue, that difference between the tax collections and the FSP formula would bring in an additional revenue to the district of $8,212,097. So this is the first look at it that we have. Once we get more details at the next meeting, we'll break out the revenue part. But we just wanted to give you kind of like an idea of what we're working with.
Questions from board members at this time?
Do you see a big change in the upcoming meeting,
Mr.
the
Contreras?
update?
Well, we'll be able to provide more of the components, more of the details on the revenue for you. But I don't see a big change.
If I may,
Dr. Rios?
when we were discussing this upstairs, we have to consider that this was based on the current property values, and right now we just have the estimated property values. The certified property values will be lower because of people making petitions for homestead exemptions, et cetera. So just how much lower it'll be, we don't necessarily know at this time, but it will be lower. So the finer details are gonna change, the overall picture, not so much. How that's gonna affect it in dollars and cents, we don't know yet, but the point of the slide here is that even though the FSP Formula Foundation, it looks like we're getting $10 million extra, that's reduced by the decreased tax dollars that we're gonna get. At the end of the day, we're still expecting about $8 million more for the entire assistance, and that's significant.
Mr. Redondo, it's my understanding that HB 3 contains the salary increases for teachers.
That is correct.
Okay. Any other question? Hearing none.
So we'll invite Luz to come up and now run us through the salary study that she conducted for us.
Okay, we welcome Luz again from Tas B. We are grateful that he can assist us every year with the salary study. It's your turn.
Thank you. Good
Welcome.
evening, Board President, Board members, and Superintendent. It's always nice to be back, so appreciate being able to work with the district. We've been working with the district for several years, and so it's always a pleasure to be able to come back. So we are presenting some information here, and I am trying to expand this just so that we have the full. That didn't do it. Hold on a second. All right, do we have technology here so that we can expand this page?
That's all.
Is that it? Okay, all right. So I'm going to go through some market comparison. Prior to, as we all know, HB 3 was just pretty much approved. On Thursday, they had the press conference, and so everybody's been going through trying to read through the bill, make sure that we have all of the information and ensure compliance with the bill for next year. And so Mr. Arredondo provided you with the information as far as the funding, and so now I'm gonna provide you with some information as far as pay increases shortly, but we're gonna go through and talk about market. We have been providing the district market comparisons, and so I am going to start with the teacher market comparison page here. And this is the same set of peer districts that we have been using with the pay study. It's the same 11 area school districts. And this year, Southwest ISD did not participate in our salary survey. We did obtain their teacher schedule. So we do have market comparison with this set. And then we have market comparison with just the two peer districts that have been the targeted focus, which is Eagle Pass and Uvalde, and we'll be looking at those. And please, if you have any questions, let me know. So what we show here is how your teacher pay compares to the market. And I'm trying to move this up just a little bit. And what you see here is at each of the 5-year intervals, 0 to 20 years. You can see your district teacher schedule, which is that orange line, compared to the market median, and the market median is that blue line. And the market median is reflective of those peer districts that we just looked at. So this is the median of those set of peer districts and how the district teacher schedule compares to that. When we want, looking at how you compare dollar-wise and percentage-wise, then we move on to the next slide here. Wish I had a clicker. Hold on. As we move on to the next slide, this shows you the dollar comparison as far as at each one of those 5-year intervals, as well as the percentage of how you compare relative to your market peers. So the way to read this is basically the 0-year salary. That list is sorted by the highest paying district, which is Southwest, with a starting salary of $52,725, and then down to the lowest paying district at entry, which is San Angelo at $40,000. That dotted line in the center, that reflects the market median, and that's that blue line that you saw in the previous graph that reflected the market median. The red line is where your starting teacher salary falls relative to this sorted list of peer districts. So your starting salary is $43,000, and so it falls between Uvalde and Carrizo Springs. You can see Eagle Pass has that $45,000 starting, and then Uvalde $43,296. So with this, relative to this group, teacher pay is fairly low to market. And then when we narrow the scope and we move to the next comparison group, which is going to be your Uvalde and Eagle Pass, you can see that the comparison to these two peer districts is the variance or lagging the market at 0.5 years is much narrower. And then you surpass the two districts at the 15 and the 20-year mark. And dollar-wise, this is what it looks like. So you are at 97% at entry to 98% at that 5-year, and then you're pretty much at market or above when it comes to the 10-year through the 20-year mark. So about 1,148, 1,075 below market for these two area districts.
I'm sorry, can I make a comment, Luz?
Mm-hmm.
The market is fine, but we know that the districts that we compete the most for teachers would be Uvalde and Eagle Pass. So when she gets to the scenarios, it's this page here that informs our recommendations for teacher salaries, particularly with Eagle Pass, because the research that people do about salaries, that kind of informs you that people are willing to drive about an hour for $1,000. So we'll base a lot of our salary increases based off of this slide here. Yes, go ahead, ma'am, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so we also looked at your teaching field stipends, and what we see here is basically your master's degree stipend. You have a $1,500 stipend. It's competitive. The median is $1,000, so you're pretty competitive with that larger set of peer districts when it comes to that stipend, as well as your secondary math and science stipend, which is $2,200, and the market median is $2,000 within that group. So competitive when it comes to those stipends. Then we look at the special ed stipend. What we're seeing as a trend is the special education self-contained stipend is more competitive, it's more robust than the general resource, because it's harder to recruit teachers to move into that assignment. And you can see that in the marketplace. The market median is $1,250, you're paying $1,100 for the general resource, which you're really fairly close to that. When it comes to the self-contained, you can see that the market median is $2,000, where your stipend there is $1,100. So aside from the special education self-contained, you're fairly competitive in all of the other teaching area stipends within your peer districts. So kudos to the district for that. We also looked at the demographics of your teacher experience. We've been looking at this for the past several years, and it really hasn't shifted or changed much. You can see here that we have the distribution of your current teacher workforce. Half of them, that 50th percentile line, and you see that blue graph line at that 11-year mark. And what this basically is indicating that 50% of your teachers fall under the 11 years of experience, and then the other half falls above the 11 years of experience. And you have a high concentration of teachers with 30-plus years of experience. And it's been tracking the same way over the past several years. All right, we're gonna look at some models. So as we mentioned, we started out early on running some pay increase models. So there's several models, and I'm gonna move to model 3. That's the one that we feel is the closest to the HB3 language and what would get the district to be in compliance with some minor tweaking, and then with some considerations that the district may want to do as far as the $2,000 increase that we're gonna talk about here. So I'm gonna bring up the model 3, which is gonna be our focus here. And this model, you can see that we ran a general pay increase of $2,000. As Dr. Rios mentioned a while ago, we started out with a general pay increase of this $2,000 to close the gap, to get close to what Eagle Pass was paying, because they basically are paying $2,000 more than the district. So this was a way to narrow that gap with them. Then we have the legislative mandate, and based on the numbers that Mr. Arredondo ended up running, and the amount that the district has to provide to comply, we feel that this $1,850 is the closest to ensure the compliance with the HB3. We will need to make some additional adjustments or tweaks to this model here, because in HB3, it also has the language that there is to be differentiated pay for teachers with 5+ years of experience. And so when we were running these models, we didn't know what this bill actually was going to end up, or the final version was going to end up being. So we had at least provided some additional adjustments at the top end to try to raise that 5-year mark, but the bill does have the language that differentiated pay will be for teachers at 5+ years of experience. So we will be needing to modify this slightly, but pretty much we have a $2,000 general pay increase, which then the district, will be determining whether you want to go with that $2,000, whether it's going to be a $1,000, whether it's going to be a $1,500 that you will end up recommending, with this $1,850 being pretty much what ends up ensuring compliance with the HB3 at the end of the day, after we've made those additional adjustments. So this model here has a proposed starting salary of $46,500, and that is based on, of course, this $2,000, which may change some depending ultimately what you end up recommending. Any questions here? So I know that there's other models in here, but this is the one that ends up pretty much ensuring compliance with the HB3 based on the numbers that the district has run.
Luz, I have a question at this
Sure.
point. Being that we normally average, let's say, if teachers move 50 miles from here, they're expecting like $1,000 raise for gas expenses, whatever. We have no idea what Eagle Pass is going to propose. The last
correct.
increase was 5.4, which is, we've never given an increase of 5.4. What in the world happened that they increased it by 5.4%? Was it market value, Dr. Rios?
Well, you
Or
know,
Luz?
I mean, I can't speak as to why. I would imagine that they needed to increase their teacher pay to be a little bit more competitive, because you've got the surrounding area, San Antonio area, the other area districts have been providing pay increases, and teacher pay has been increasing some. So I can only imagine that they felt that there was a need to be able to do that. And you know, for districts to provide that sizable pay increase, you have to look at your staffing. You know, so maybe they made some staffing changes. Maybe they reduced some staffing so that they could address that 5.4, or they ended up, you know, taking it out of their fund balance. I don't know, you know, I have no idea, but very likely it was the need to be a little bit more competitive with teacher pay.
And the reason I ask is if we're comparing, you know, we're really using last year's numbers. We don't know what this year will be.
Yes, and just to keep in mind, I mean, so HB3, basically what it has done is it has given districts flexibility, right? It has given districts greater flexibility. You have to comply 30% of the new monies, ultimately, that you get from that basic allotment increase. You have to end up using that towards pay increases, with 75% of that 30% chunk going towards teachers, nurses, librarians, and counselors.
Yes.
So, so while it's going to be different for each district, because that 30% of that increase in their basic allotment, depending on where they were, right, that amount, when they end up doing that calculation, is going to be different for each district. So it is going to be a little bit challenging. We won't know how this is going to impact until next year when we take a look at all the market. And I think next year is going to be critical to see, okay, where did everybody land after they ran their numbers and they gave the pay increases. But we know that by you providing this additional amount, we know that most districts will probably do just the amount to comply. In this case, I believe that what we have in this model, it's not only the amount to comply, but this additional amount locally, which is the $2,000 right now in this model, for the district to try to be a little bit more competitive within your peers, and of course, this being Eagle Pass.
I understand. Dr. Rios?
But another significant issue that has to do with pay is geography. Eagle Pass sees themselves not only comparing to Del Rio, but also to Laredo. And if you include Laredo in the market study, which Luz has for us, you can see how Laredo is $2,000 still above Eagle Pass. At one time, approximately 6 years ago, we were above Eagle Pass, and the very next year the board still took a bold vote and increased the salary. So for 2 years, we were consistently above Eagle Pass. But as Laredo grew significantly, Eagle Pass felt compelled to keep up closer because they're right between the both of us. So they've been more aggressive in their salaries because they don't see themselves just competing with Del Rio, but also competing with Laredo. For all intents and purposes, we compete with Uvalde and Eagle Pass. But over the last 2 years, Eagle Pass was aggressive in trying to keep up with Laredo, so they went up $2,000. And really that happened over the last 3 years. But this last year, we approved our salaries before they did, and we didn't keep up with them. So now, as we did 6 years ago, the board voted to give a $2,000 pay raise. We're doing the same again to catch up and not stay behind, or at least right now we're making that recommendation for discussion. At the next board meeting, in the interactive workbook, we'll share with you all the cost of $1,000, $1,500, and $2,000, plus the legislative mandate, and then the board can start playing with the interactive workbook, and for added positions that would also require salaries. And when Luz finishes, I'll just mention a couple of those added positions that would also affect the salary increases that we give.
There are many factors that are taken into consideration. Tax base, for example, in Eagle Pass is quite enormous compared to Doriel. And we realize that 75% is a low number. You know, when it comes to salaries, teacher salaries is more closer to 80,000 or 80%, I'm sorry. 80% of the budget is basically used up by salaries. So we understand that. It's just that we're trying to realize, you know, what the other districts are anticipating, you know, and it's hard to say.
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting budget process for, you know, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's the teacher schedule. And that's the only one that I really wanted to talk about tonight, because that's the one that basically gets you close to that HB3 requirement, although we did have multiple models in this presentation here. Then we're going to look at market comparison now for the other pay groups. And we're going to start with the administrative professional group. Basically, we break the administrative professional into 3 subgroups. And the first group is the central administration group overall. And what we have here is a graph that reflects the market relative to how the district pays relative to the market median, with the market median being the 0-year line, and anything to the right of that 0% line is above market, and anything to the left is below market. Now, anything that's dark blue is within 10% of market, which we consider to be within a competitive range of pay. Anything that is in light blue is either more than 10% above market or more than 10% below market. And there may be appropriate reasons for this. Sometimes if it's above market pay, more than 10% above market pay, it may be that you have someone that's been in the job for quite some time, or their scope of responsibility is a little bit greater relative to the market comparison that we're using to survey your pay to the market. Then as far as below market pay is, it could be that you either have someone that's fairly new in the job, or the job is somewhat different as well. Maybe it's lesser in scope than, let's say, the survey job that we're comparing it to. Okay? But this is, overall, this is your pay comparisons. Really is not bad. You have, a large number of your jobs, central administration jobs, contained within that 10% of market. So good job there. And then we're gonna look at your other, hold on a second. So the next page here, that's basically the detailed information to that graph. And I'd like to kind of look at the graph because it's not a whole lot of numbers and you can see that. But if you want to take a look at the detail, it's on this page 15. Then the next comparison is that campus administration. So this is your counselors, your assistant principals, your principals. And for this group, you can see that all of these jobs are paid within 10% of market. So really good. Kudos to the district for maintaining pay for your campus administrators within that 10% of market. You don't have any job that's paid more than 10% or any job that's paid greater than less than the 10% variance that we'd like to see. The market detail is on this next page that supports that graph. And then on your professional salary comparison, so this group basically is pretty much coordinators, your special ed, specialized positions. We call those the alphabet soup, your speech language pathologist, your diags, your SLP assistant. We also have some coordinators here. And for the most part, the majority of the jobs are either within 10% of market or more than 10% above market. So in essence, the district's pay is really, for the most part, pretty much competitive with your peers. There's very few jobs that are more than 10% below market. We do have some that are paid above market, and again, that has to do with individuals that either have been here for quite some time, or that scope of responsibility may be a little bit different. And then the next page is the market detail that supports that graph that we just saw. We also realigned or readjusted your pay ranges so that as we're modeling the pay increases, your minimums, your midpoints, and maximums are increased so that individuals can move through that range and you stay competitive at your entry. And of course, employees, as we model the pay increases, those pay increases are being modeled off of the adjusted pay range midpoints. So it kind of benefits the employee because we are adjusting those pay ranges, but it's keeping you competitive with your peers when it comes to starting pay, and those midpoints are connected to those market values. So you see the pay plans that we have here. No jobs were moved. They're all in the same pay grades. The only thing that was adjusted were the pay ranges, minimum, midpoints, and maximums for all of these pay grades. Then we're going to look at the market comparison for the paraprofessionals. And we're going to start with a subgroup, clerical technical. So very similar to the administrative professional, we subdivide the market for your non-exempt into clerical, technical, instructional support, and auxiliary. And so for your clerical technical, this is the market comparison. So for this group, you can see, again, the same concept. Any job that is dark blue, those positions are paid within 10% of market. Anything that's light blue, to the right of that zero line, they're above market. To the left of that zero line, they're below market. And you can see here that you almost have an even distribution of jobs that are more than 10% above, and those that are more than 10% below with your paraprofessional clerical technical group here. This is the market detail on the following page. And then we're going to move on to your what we have here is, in addition to the market detail, you also can see how competitive your starting rates of pay for this group is. We do not capture the starting rates as far as minimums, comparisons for administrative professional, because the pay for these individuals and the pay ranges is driven much more so based on the market and the alignment of that midpoint. But for non-exempt jobs, starting rate of pay is very critical. That is what they see when they're looking at applying. That is what they see when they're considering accepting a job. And so when we look at the market at the starting rate of pay for your pay ranges for the clerical technical, this group is right at market. So your pay ranges are overall still very competitive at entry for the group, and that's what that market comparison page showed. Now the next graph here that we have, this is the instructional support. So this is your aides, your library aides, your special ed aides, your computer lab aides. You can see that all of these positions, very similar to your campus administrators, are paid within 10% of market. So none of these positions are paid more than 10% or less than 10% of market. So again, good job with this group. This is the market detail overall, and you can see here the district pay compared to market is at 100% overall for the group, although you can see some individual differences, but as a group they were at 100%, and as a group they were all within 10% of market. And then the range minimum on this following page here, which is showing you that you're about 4% above market. So your starting rates of pay are still fairly good. We've made some adjustments to the pay ranges, not huge adjustments, just some adjustments so that you continue to be competitive. And those pay ranges also allow for employees to move through their range given the pay increases that we are considering for these pay groups as well. So here you can see no changes in jobs until we get to pay grade 5. And we did make some, or we are recommending some changes in pay grades for a few positions. You can see that in this pay grade 5, we have 3 positions that were in a pay grade 4, and we are recommending that they be realigned to a pay grade 5 based on market and based on job responsibilities. We have the payroll clerk, aligning that with the payroll 5 jobs that also, we're talking about high school bookkeeper, we're talking about accounting clerk, we're talking about budget clerk, accounts payable clerk, and so the roles are very comparable, they're not the same, but they're similar. And so that's just placing the job really in a pay grade that's more appropriate given those responsibilities, as well as the employee benefits position and the human resource specialist position relative to the role of the other positions there. So looking at market and looking at those job responsibilities, they're very comparable, and so we're just recommending that they be placed in that pay grade. Then we're also recommending in pay grade 6, the help desk technician position be moved up based on market. Technology jobs, the market is very strong. It tends to, those positions are very competitive, and those skill sets are hard to find individuals with those skill sets. And so placement in that pay grade 6 would be a better alignment given the market and given the responsibilities. And those are the only changes for this group. And so that's it as far as the recommendations of pay grade changes for your paraprofessional group. Then we're going to move to auxiliary. And for your auxiliary group here, you can see that overall, we have quite a few jobs in that dark blue. Again, they're within 10% of market. But we also have some that are below market, and the below market tend to be kind of more your skilled trades, licensed trades, police officer, and so for these positions, the market also tends to be very competitive. We have used non-school market and combined it with school market for the comparison for auxiliary jobs. And so for the most part, this group does contain a lot more non-school market from third-party salary surveys that we purchase. And then we use that market data to combine it with school district data for comparison. So for this group here, you have some jobs that are low to market, and we do have some recommendations for improvement. And given the pay increase that we may be able to provide or the district may consider providing, that'll probably address quite a bit of the below market pay comparisons that you have for the group. On this page 36 through 37, this is the detail that basically supports that graph that we just saw. So you can see the market rate, the district rate, that comparison, and then you can also see how your midpoints compare to the market value. And so for this group overall, the market pay was at 95% of market, 5% below market overall as a group. But you can see there that 19 jobs out of the 25 were within that 10% of market, and 6 jobs out of this 25 benchmarks that we looked at were the ones that were greater than 10% below. And that's in that little summary of pay comparison table that we have for each category, if you want to go back and take a look at that as well, which is also reflected in the graph pages. Then we also looked at the minimums for the jobs as well, and you can see that overall the minimums are at 96%. So this group, we needed to adjust the ranges a little bit more, which we did, and get the starting rates a little bit more competitive. So we've taken the starting rate of pay at $10 an hour, and the minimums, midpoints, and maximums have been adjusted for this group. And you can see here that for this group, we don't have any changes in jobs moving. And we have the bus driver rate going to $13.50 an hour. So we have that bus driver in its own pay range. What we're finding is districts are having a very hard time at recruiting bus drivers, and the pay ranges and the starting rates of pay have had to be adjusted much stronger than pay ranges for other jobs, and it's causing compression if we leave them within the other pay grades. And so what has really helped is pulling them out into their own pay range, and that way when the district has to make that improvement or that adjustment to the range, you're only then affecting the job that is needing that market, more market competitive pay. Otherwise, you would be impacting other positions that may be okay to market in the pay grade that they're in, if they're in that same pay grade with bus drivers. So this has really been helping a lot of districts quite a bit, having that bus driver separately. All right, so we're going to take a look at some cost estimates. And as I mentioned, we had several models, and because we were prepared for the board meeting, but HB3 came along and was pretty much, I think, is going to be law. And so we're going to focus on Model 3. As I mentioned, when we walked through that teacher schedule that reflected the $2,000 pay increase plus the legislative mandate of that $1,850. And so that's what this reflects. It also reflects those few additional adjustments on the teacher schedule that I've mentioned. We're going to have to make some revisions so that the district is in compliance with that provision for the 5+ years of experience with that differentiated pay. As you can see here, when we take a look at what a 2% equates to and the $1,850, it basically ends up equating to a little over a 7% increase. It actually ends up being about the 3.6 plus the 1850 legislative mandate as a total for the district for teacher pay ends up being closer to a 7% increase for teachers. And so we have modeled a 7% increase for the other pay groups so that we can continue to apply that amount of an increase and be consistent across the board with other pay groups as far as the general pay increase. What you see here is 7% of the adjusted range midpoints for your administrative professionals, for your paraprofessionals, and for your auxiliary, with all employees receiving the modeled 7% increase here. So to give the general pay increase amount, we are looking at a $3,311,194 increase. Then the legislative mandate of that $1,850, plus some additional adjustments that we need to provide, particularly to get individuals into the new minimums, because that 7% may not have been enough. There's just a few, it's not that many. You can see under the paraprofessional, there's 3 that needed that additional adjustment to get them into the new minimums. And some on the administrative professional, we needed to provide a few additional adjustments to ensure that those in the teacher career path, those administrators in the teacher career path, such as counselors, assistant principals, are not paid less than what they would be paid on a daily rate basis as a teacher. So those are those few adjustments under that targeted adjustment too. For a total cost, we're looking at $4,551,143. This is basically a 7.8% increase to your current payroll budget, and the cost that we have as far as your current payroll budget right now is a little over $58 million. So again, there's going to be some minor adjustments that we need to come back and do for that teacher schedule. And then the district, as Dr. Rios mentioned, you will be able to, based on your digital, system, you'll be able to run whether you're going to select a 1,000, 1,500, or maintain the 2,000 general pay increase for your teachers that's included in this model here. And pretty much that is all that I have. Any questions?
Board members?
No, I wish I could have had it before, that way I could have questions. At this point, I'm just looking at it right now, so maybe if it comes up again, I'll probably have I'll have questions.
We, well, a couple things. 2 weeks ago, I did provide the salary scales on the board update. However, at this point, we really have to rework the tables. And my question is, by when do you think you could have that to us, Lou, so that we could provide it to the board? The option 3 worked over 3 times, $1,000, $1,500, and $2,000.
We can get that to you next early part of next week. Just keep in mind, we're rerunning models for every district. So pretty much what you're seeing here tonight, as far as we had 3 models prepared to walk through, we're doing the very same thing with every other district, because ultimately the other models that were included in the packets were, didn't end up meeting the HB3.
No, I mean, I realize the
similar,
HB3.
but I think early part of next week we can certainly provide you that at the latest.
I realize that the HB3 might have thrown a kink and everything, right? So I understand, however, realistically, we really can't comment on anything, when they just see it right now. I mean, later on, as we study it and we're more familiarized with the numbers, I'm pretty sure that we're gonna have a lot more questions as where we're going with the budget.
The HB3 was finalized on Thursday, so it's fairly recent.
Yes.
Luz, I had a couple of questions.
Sure.
Well, before I ask you the question, I wanted to call attention to board members on page 35. If you look at the food service manager elementary, we're only above by 1%. So I think if we would have decreased it, we would have been way below.
I'm sorry, for which one?
No,
Oh, okay.
it's something. The question I had for you, Luz, is do you take a look at the days, contract days, or not contract days, but
Duty
the days,
schedules?
especially for the paraprofessional?
So when we look at the market comparison that we have here for your paraprofessionals and your auxiliaries is based on an hourly rate basis, so that we're doing the comparison apples to apples. The duty schedule days are going to differ across districts, and they're going to basically have the duty days based on program needs. You know, some districts have gone to District of Innovation, and so they've extended the learning day, they've reduced calendar days, and so we feel that the best approach to comparing the pay is really looking at how you pay on an hourly rate basis, and that's what you have in that market comparison.
Okay. And my other question had to do with safety and security. I guess, you know, what I see is that a lot of districts have added personnel in the police force. Others concentrated on technology, cameras, and so forth. And it's hard to say, you know, there's other extreme measures, you know, like having a school marshal or somebody that's armed, you know, within the campus. But realistically, you know, there's campuses here that are exposed. You know, we don't have gymnasiums, one school, for example, and it's hard to kind of secure the campus in a way that is comparable with the other schools, because they do have gyms, and so we pondered with the idea of adding, you know, more, you know, personnel, and that's a costly issue, but you know, we're still struggling with making a decision in regard to, you know, security, but you know, we're concentrating more on facility needs and than those other measures that I mentioned, you know, such as adding personnel.
Yeah.
But I know that districts have added personnel, and that creates quite a cost, you know, in regard to the expenses that are used for the police department.
You know, as you mentioned earlier, when we look at salaries, I mean, salaries account for 80% of a district's budget, total operating costs, right? So staffing is going to be what, you know, the way for districts to manage that. But you also need to take a look at your program needs. You also need to look at, you know, your district, and sometimes, you know, I mean, that's very local driven, because it's compliance, it's safety, it's you know, a variety of criteria or issues that you've already mentioned. So there's been an increase in the safety, and part of that has been either increased use of surveillance or an increase in actual FTEs of security guards and police officers. And it's just, you know, what works best for the district that ends up being the determining factor.
Right. Questions, other questions from board members? Mr. Orfeld?
Not at this particular moment, sir.
Okay. Mrs. Gonzalez? Luz, every year I just want to praise you for working with us, because you're getting to know the district quite well, and I think your reports are comprehensive in nature, and it gives us a lot of good information, you know, where you have above and below the 10% threshold, and those are the areas that we want to concentrate in. By highlighting those with, you know, color, I can see, especially in the auxiliary paraprofessional, you know, that's an area of need to make changes.
And keep in mind that the comparisons also are driven by, you know, how long someone's been in a job. So sometimes the below market comparison, maybe if someone has is fairly new to the job, when we're looking at market comparison. Of course, we don't survey and we don't capture years in the job or years of experience. No survey out there does that, but there is kind of a standard within compensation that, you know, if you're experienced, you should be closer to that market or midpoint value. And if you're newer in the job, then you're going to be on the lower end of that market comparison as well. When it's a concern is when you're experienced in the job and your pay is really below or significantly below market, then that's when you really want to find out what's going on.
Any other questions?
I just want to make a comment.
Mr.
You know,
Contreras?
I would want for our district in all factors for us to not be further than 2% from market value in all jobs. I mean, I know it's going to be expensive, but what would it take for us to be not to be further than 2% from market value? Because I see that there's quite a variance in some, especially in the paraprofessional, you know, in non-teacher jobs. We're out there. You know, prime example is the journeyman electrician. It was a 19% from market value.
So, so here's some caution that I would like to share with trying to take everyone to, let's say, 98% of market. That would be within 2% of market, okay? And the reason that I say that is you're gonna take someone with 0 years to 98% of market, and you've got somebody that's got 10 years, and we're gonna need to take them up, you know, if they're, because they're already probably paid below market, let's say, or within 10% of market, and if we take them to 98% of market, there is no differentiation between someone brand new and someone with 10 years of experience. So we've compressed pay, and we've taken away the value of the experience, which creates really a lot of morale issues, right? So your employees will end up feeling like their experience really has been removed, the value of that experience. So we want to, it's appropriate to have pay variances. It's very appropriate. We don't need everybody to be paid at 95% of market. We don't need everyone to be paid at 98% of market, because a lot of it's driven by experience for your non-exempts, right? It's primarily experience in the job. Now, with that said, when I say we'd like to have pay within 10% of market, that's good. I mean, we got paid at 90% of market, right? So if the majority of your employees are within 90% of market, that's good. It's now looking to see, okay, where are the outliers, those that are below market, and why are they below market? And if it's because they're brand new in the job and they're really below market, well, we need to make some improvements to those starting ranges, which is one of the recommendations, right? So we increase the starting range. Now, in the model that we talked about here, a 7% increase is going to reduce that below market comparison. Now, because not only are they gonna possibly get a 7% increase, but then the minimum is adjusted as well, right? So if that 7% isn't enough, they get moved up into the minimum. So we can do that. To do that all in 1 year, to take everybody's pay to that, you'll have very, very compressed pay. And that concept or that approach creates so much internal unrest with employees, particularly with your non-exempt, who value their experience a whole lot more, because that's all they bring to the table. Unlike, let's say, your administrative and professionals that bring credentials and qualifications in addition to experience. So, I mean, can it be done? Yes, but I think that that approach is not really addressing or setting the pay system in the best or most effective manner. I would say, let's have competitive starting rates. Let's get paid for those that are below market, because you've got others that are paid okay. So basically utilizing your monies to address those that need it the most, and then make sure that everybody else still stays within a competitive range of pay.
No, I understand your point, ma'am. I fully understand, of course, and you also take what the job worth is, you know, take that into consideration, so I fully understand what you're saying. However, I would want it for us to be more competitive. you know, and maybe it might not be this first year. You know, maybe we can set a goal in the next 2 or 3 years, but for us to get there at some point or another.
And we can actually, you know, I mean, it can be a multi-year implementation. We can actually, in fact, have some models where we get individuals, you know, to within X% of market, and then create differentiation based on experience as well. It gets very costly, but we can do that as well here. You know, I think the target and the focus was trying to provide the pay increases for the employees given the HB3 compliance and actually getting you some more competitive pay ranges and then addressing those that are really more below market. The district, while you have some pay comparisons that are below market, it's not that many. You know, my work across the state with so many districts, you know, when you see the job, the market comparisons for your hourly employees, for the most, a large number of them are what we consider to be within market range, right? You do have pockets, and those pockets we are focusing on, and we are recommending adjustments.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this point,
Sorry.
Dr. Rios?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Russ. Our intentions are to provide the interactive workbook between now and the next meeting and give you the options of a base pay increase of 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 for the teachers, and then how that would affect everybody else, with the max being a 7% increase. Along with that, the other positions that fit into the whole salary discussion are 4 positions that will also add in the workbook, and that's like Mr. Mesa mentioned earlier, additional peace officers. This year we increased by 1. Have y'all consider whether we want to increase another 1 or 2 more? So those options will be there. We have chosen as a district to move more towards the Doriel Cares Initiative and not renew our subscriptions with Leader and Me and Capturing Kids' Hearts, but to keep the movement going on the Leader, on the Capturing Kids' Hearts, and now the big drug awareness program that I've talked to the board about, we'll consider a coordinator for student services that would work with that piece, a director of bilingual education. Our scores have shown some increase, but not at the accelerated amount that we need our bilingual scores to go up. So we've talked with Ms. Gomez about increasing the bilingual department and what that would look like if we had a director of bilingual ed. And then the other piece is, for many years, we've had critical needs aides in the district. We have ladies that have worked as critical needs aides for 15 years or more, some 5 years, but forever they've worked at a minimum rate of pay with no benefits. So while we may not be able to turn everybody from a critical needs aide to an official critical needs aide employee, full employee, we can have different scenarios of whether we would increase it by 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, and see what that would cost. So we hope to have these costs, salary costs, in the workbook, and then have the board ask questions and weigh where we want to go, because even though we will have increased dollars in the budget, thanks to House Bill 3, just the money can't go on forever, and there have to be limits with other projects. But these are the salary positions that we want y'all to consider, and give us your feedback and coaches on what direction we should take. And we look to have that interactive workbook definitely 10 days before the next budget workshop, to give y'all time to ask questions and make that workshop a little bit more productive.
Okay, at this point, we will close the workshop and open our regular meeting. We are on item 5, and we go to item 6, citizens to be heard. We have one person that signed up, B. Vallejo. Topic is going to be 11A, B, and C, item 13, A and B. Ms. Vallejo, I'm going to ask that you summarize, being that we only have 5 minutes for each presenter. If you could summarize all those together
Yes,
for
certainly.
the sake of time.
Okay, if you look at that item and the amounts, they're about $500,000. And some of the repairs that have been done at the high school were basically done at the 200 wing. Although there were areas that have flooded for years and nothing was done there, like the 400 wing that is now going to be planned. They're working on the dining hall, but the other area that flooded was the little theater and also the library. So every time we have a major downpour, water comes into these areas, and they have not been targeted to be the first ones to be redone. But anyway, now on those items, we're talking about working at the dining hall. And I am asking that you stop all construction at the high school and that you all look at the areas that really do need to be repaired and that you target those areas first. At the same time, I'm asking that really I would like to see it just stop completely, because it's like we're just fixing things in a hodgepodge manner, and maybe take that money and use it to plan the new Cardwell School. I know that there is enough money in the fund balance, but without having to move the students, without just putting up a fence past the playground area, there's plenty of property there to begin planning for that new school and not having to move the students. So my recommendation tonight is I'm asking you to stop spending money the way that we're spending it. The area that was repaired there at the dining hall, the stage was closed down, and now they're thinking about putting a glass wall there. So there would be a glass wall between the old gym and the cafeteria, which would eliminate a little dining room area there for the teachers to eat in, and you have a glass wall facing the old gym. Doesn't make any sense. Plus, if you're going to put in their safety glass, it's very, very expensive. I think we're better off just keeping what we have or not putting a glass wall at all. So again, I'm asking that you reconsider spending so much money at Del Rio High School when you could be taking that money and planning Cardwell Elementary. And so I'm appealing to you all to be a little bit more conscious about the constructions that we are doing, because when we worked on the stadium, we spent all these millions of dollars at the stadium, and now we have a smaller stadium. It's really unacceptable. You guys as board members need to take all of these projects, and you need to look at them. You need to go out there and view the projects and make sure that our money is being spent wisely and that we are getting our money's worth. Because we're just spending, and we still have Cardwell here after 8 years, still waiting. So that's what I'm here to ask you is please don't fund any more money. Stop the construction, reevaluate it, look at it. I think that we can do without the convection ovens, till 2020 and 2021 school year. I really do, because we've been dealing with this for a long time. I mean, there is mold and mildew problems at the high school, and I don't hear anyone addressing those. So I think you all need to stop and reconsider the project again and look at the priorities there and look at the priorities in our school district. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we go straight from 6 to item 11, administration. A, discussion to value engineering the dining hall renovations at Doriel High School. Les Henge.
Good evening, President Mesa, Dr. Rios, members of the board. Tonight's presentation, we will be looking at the project history and schedule of the dining hall renovation. We'll look at the status on the ceiling renovation, contractor scheduled values that we received from general contractor bids this week on the project, funding sources and allocations of funding. Project history, I report on this every month. Tonight we will be seeking recommendation to award to a general contractor. And the work currently is being scheduled for, or should that recommendation go through tonight, it's projected to take 120 days. So we would have a substantial completion of around the 10th month, 2019. Again, this is the area here that we would be demoing and doing most of the renovation in. The contractor scheduled values that we received this week, we only had one general contractor submit on the bid, and the original contractor bid price was $1,088,500. After going through all the different values that they had included in there, we were able to bring it down to $1,010,400. And what we're proposing tonight is two different options. One option would be to move forward with the bid that was received at the $1,010,400, or possibly doing a value engineering on the flooring and deferring that until the next budget year. If we did that, that would bring the cost down by $230,000, making the value engineered total at $780,400. The ceiling renovation, after consideration on that, we have decided at this point, before we can address the acoustics, we do need to do a full ceiling scrape, disposal of the material, clean the surface, apply primer, as well as a couple coats of dry fall paint. The library ceiling also has the same materials, so this ceiling renovation would include the main mall area where the cafeteria is, around the library, as well as in the library. And then for next budget year, we would, once all that was completed and the glass wall were in place, then we would want to bring a acoustics engineer in to give a recommendation on how to deal with the acoustics. At that point, we won't have material that's absorbing a lot of the sound, so we'll know exactly what we're dealing with at that point. So far, contractor quotes that we have received are ranging anywhere from $210,000 to $280,000 on the ceiling to do this, which is about a third of what we were originally looking at, keeping in mind that this does not include any type of engineering on acoustics. So at this point, we have put that portion of the project out for bid, and we're anticipating to have a recommendation during our normal June meeting on how we're going to, or how we'd like to recommend proceeding with the ceiling. Current funding sources on this, we started out with a committed budget of $600,000. We've encumbered $60,000, which is 10% for architect fees. And we're looking at additional funding sources, which the next slide will give a breakdown on what those funding allocations would be for. Some of the areas that we've been looking at is favorability in the insurance budget of $150,000. We have favorability with the Dr. Lonnie Green driveway expansion of $221,000. And we still have $400,000 from our construction money that was reallocated from the technology budget, I believe 2 meetings ago. In total, with the committed budget that we currently have, deducting out the architect fees and these additional funding sources, we'd have the potential of $1.311,000. The allocation of funds, we've done a breakdown here on increased architect fees that we would have on the project. We would be applying or requesting a contingency fund on the project. The ceiling renovation, we've projected right around $250,000, but we firmly believe it's going to be less than that. Cafeteria furniture, once the project's done, we will need to have additional furniture brought in because the dining area will expand as far as seating for the students, plus the food lines will change also to help cut down on some of that congestion in the main hall area. And then they also have audio-visual equipment that they use for assemblies and things like that or meetings in the cafeteria. So this part of allocation of funds for technology improvements would help with intercom, anything technical that we're going to need. During the robotics competition, we did repurpose the 3 older TVs that are in there, but I would like to get something more up to date that they could use to be able to hold events after school and things like that, and the TVs need to be much larger than what they are. I know I ran through a lot there, but questions, I'll be more than happy to address anything on here.
Okay, first of all, before I open it for questions, this is discussion item only.
Correct, yes.
Okay, Mr. Contreras. No. Mr. Overfelt?
I know if ultimately approved here in a bit, it says a start date of June 1, I think you said, in the cafeteria, right, Mr. Henge?
Yes, sir.
Work to begin June 1 with substantial completion, hopefully by October of 2019. I didn't know if it should just be the 4 of us deciding this evening. I didn't know if it was something that could be pushed into June, which would push completion into November. There, I mean, regardless, we're going to be working while school's going on, because there's no way to get it done unless you would have started the moment. Well, we couldn't even start with the. This is starting with the school being out that next day on Saturday.
Dr. Rios?
That's my only.
I would say 2 things. I think that this board has had extensive discussion, including approving the initial schematic design of the project. And more importantly, the biggest concern is that the demolition and raising of the roof, of the floor where the ceiling area is, that part has to be completed before the start of school. The rest of the project can be completed. The kiosk that's going to be built in the lower mall area, and some of the trim work and the seats around, all of that detail work can get done while the students are there. But the demolition, the raising of the floor, the ramp, the level, time is of the essence with that, because that needs to be done over the summer. So I would recommend that the board vote on it. I think the board approved the schematic design, and the only difference here is that we're withholding the floor so that we can make sure to provide the floor renovation, so we can make sure that we either A, find a cheaper option for the floor, or B, to ensure that if we don't find a cheaper option, at least we provided a contingency fund should we find anything when we go in to do the demolition, be able to order the furniture on time. But that's my recommendation, just because I've had extensive discussion with both the architect and the contractor.
And last one, since discussion on value engineering, that's ultimately going to be y'all's recommendation is to go the valued engineered way?
Yes, sir. I would like to hold off on the floor, mainly because I think it's important that we take care of the other items Go to the second to the last slide, Mr. Henge, where we listed the other, right there, back one. I think it's important that we get the ceiling renovations out of the way, that we provide for the furniture and the contingency fund, because we don't know, once they go in and demolish, we don't know if they're gonna find something that's gonna necessitate any type of work in there. So I always like to have some leeway to not have to come back to the board. And I also believe that we can find a cheaper option for the floor that would decrease the cost and still have something that's aesthetically appropriate and user-friendly.
When we say floor, there, maybe I forgot we had this discussion at some point. When we say floor, because right now it's that, what I'd call lacquered concrete in there. Are we looking at going to something else, like just a regular tiling, or still that whole idea of lacquered?
Well, we have the terrazzo at the upper level of the cafeteria, and then we have the floor that you described.
Right.
So the idea would be to put terrazzo floor down there, but that, as expensive as that is, there might be an overlay that we could use over the whole floor that would be a whole lot cheaper than just having the terrazzo floor down there. But I want to fully explore all those ideas with the architect and the contractor, and if there's a cheaper way of doing it and that looks aesthetically appropriate, it's going to get walked on. So that's, I really want to leave that for the end, just to see if we find a cheaper option and be able to provide for the other items that we've listed there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Henge, I have two questions. My biggest concern is with the acoustics. Once you remove that insulation-looking type material, I know that with past experience, for example, at Doriel Middle School, any, I guess, amplified sound created an echo, and acoustics had to be addressed at a later point after the opening of the school. And my concern is such a vast area, open area, that it's hard to determine what will happen once you remove, that insulation type of material. And then how smooth is it going to be? Because you can't really see the surface until you remove it. And so, the picture looks great if you paint it white, but I'm thinking, what if it's not smooth, and aesthetically doesn't look correct? What other costs would it involve?
Mr. President, we removed a section of it already that we shared with maybe the last board meeting, and we had someone look at how easy it would be to remove and leave it at that area. It's going to be aesthetically appropriate without that insulation there. The reason that we're not as concerned as, for example, Del Rio Middle School, that it's just terrible when it comes to acoustics, is one, the ceiling. If you look at the ceiling from the floor to the top, it's not as high as Del Rio Middle School. So although the square footage area is just as open, the ceiling is not as high. But as soon as we're done putting up the wall that separates the gym and the cafeteria, at that point we'll engage an acoustical engineer to make some recommendations. But I would hate to engage an acoustical engineer before that wall between the gym and the cafeteria is put up, because whatever measurements they take, they're not going to be accurate. So I think that that's definitely something that we're going to have to deal with. But I'd rather we deal with it as soon as that wall is up and we get a truer picture of what it's going to look like.
Well, with that being said, would it be possible then to just that area that has already been cleaned up, to apply some of the, first of all, you need primer, and then you need several coats. Would that be feasible to see if, it's going to be aesthetically correct? Would it be possible?
Right. Yes, actually, we've done, I believe, like a 4x4 section of it already, where we scraped it, And we did clean it, we applied the primer. I don't believe we have 2 coats of dry fall paint on there yet, but the results we're getting, it basically resembles the columns throughout the main mall area. It's like the same material. It's not gonna be super smooth, but it's not gonna be pitted to the point where we have to come in and apply new stucco, at least at this point.
Would it be possible, let's say, when we have our next ceremony thing there at the high school Friday, to show us that area?
I'll be more than happy to.
Can you make sure, Mr. Henge, that they apply the 2 coats of paint between now and then so they can get a better view of what it's gonna look like?
Absolutely.
Okay, and so you don't anticipate any area that might be different from that one in regard to the smoothness?
It's almost 37,000 square feet. I don't want to say nowhere, but nowhere in main view that we can see right now. So,
okay. Those are all the questions I had.
Thank you.
I appreciate the fact that you have the allocation of funds where they're coming from. I know we had that in the update, but it's just a good reminder that they're coming from that area. Ms. Gonzalez, questions? No questions.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, then we go on to item 11B. Consideration to approve modifications of the 2018-2019 general fund balance commitments for the dining hall renovations at Doriel High School in the amount of $221,000 yet. Mr. Henry Arredondo.
Okay, good evening once again. On August 27, 2018, the Board of Trustees approved the committed fund balance, which included $392,428 for Lonnie Green driveway expansion. After applying the encumbered amount for the Lonnie Green driveway project, we have a remaining balance of $221,000, and these committed funds are no longer required for this project. We are requesting to reallocate the remaining funds for the dining hall renovations at Doriel High School.
Questions from board members? Hearing none, the recommendation, please.
It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve modification of the 2018-2019 general fund balance commitments for the dining hall renovations at Doriel High School in the amount of $221,000.
You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion for approval?
So move.
Mr. Contreras, seconded by Mr. Overfeld. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your right hand. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 11C, consideration to approve modifications of the 2018-2019 general fund balance commitments for the dining hall renovations at Doriel High School in the amount of $150,000. Mr. Arredondo.
Good evening once again. On August 27, 2018, the Board of Trustees approved the committed fund balance, which included $500,000 for health insurance contribution. Recently, our health insurance consultant presented a healthy projected fund balance, and these committed funds are no longer required. On May 20, 2019, the Board of Trustees approved the reallocation of $350,000 for district-wide cafeteria equipment needs. At this time, we would like to reallocate the remaining $150,000 of these committed funds for the dining hall renovations at Doriel High School.
Questions from board members? Hearing none, recommendation, please.
It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve modification of the 2018-2019 general fund balance commitments for the dining hall renovations at Doriel High School in the amount of $150,000.
You've heard the recommendation from administration. I'll entertain a motion for approval. Mr. Contreras, is there a second? Mr. Overfeld, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your right hand. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We go to item 13, technology and operations. Consideration to approve purchase order over $25,000 to Kitchen Resources in the amount not to exceed $38,637.60. Funding source, general fund committed for the purchase of convection ovens. Mr. Henge.
Good evening once again. This purchase order over $25,000 is for convection ovens at Lamar. Calderon, and Del Rio Freshman. Working with the food service department as well as our maintenance guys that repair this equipment. I've been instructed that these are items that are 25 to 30 years old. We've had a lot of issues with them breaking down, causing delays with being able to get things heated up. We did receive a committed budget last month, or we recommitted monies last month for food service equipment at $350,000. This is just one portion of that. This was done under interlocal bids, and we do have the district-wide list that we shared with the board last month that we'll be bringing in June for additional equipment that we'll be replacing throughout the summer.
Questions from board members? Ms. Gonzalez? No questions? Mr. Henke, I just want to make a statement here that I don't think we should wait that long, when the employees make a request for, again, whether it's fixing items that are broken. It took a while for this to be addressed, and I think something needs to happen to correct the way the process is done, to wait at the end of the year. For the safety of all the employees and the managers and everyone that uses these appliances, that they're in disrepair, something needs to change. With that statement being said, I just hope that it's addressed, Dr. Rios.
Yes, sir. We have a process where hopefully within the next 24 months, all of it will be replaced. They're all big ticket items, but absolutely.
For safety.
Yes, sir.
Okay, no questions from board members, so can I hear a recommendation from the administration, please?
It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve the purchase order over $25,000 to Kitchen Resources in the amount not to exceed $38,637.60.
Right, the recommendation, is there a motion for approval? Mr. Contreras, second by Ms. Gonzalez. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your right hand. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Item 13B, consideration to award request for competitive proposal, RFP number 19-05 for the dining hall renovations at Doriel High School. Mr. Henge.
Thank you. As indicated in the PowerPoint that I recently shared, we received only one contract or one general contractor bid on this particular project. Our construction manager has been working directly with the contractor to make sure that numbers were within what our expectations were. There was some communication that went back and forth, and we were able to save a little over $70,000, I think, off what the original bid was. So at this point, the architect has reviewed it. We've gone through the grading process on it, and we're comfortable with moving forward with this particular contractor.
The only thing I would like to ask is this: if any thing comes up out of the ordinary and additional value engineering needs to be done, would you make sure that it's brought to the board?
Absolutely, and I'll continue to report monthly on how these projects are all coming along. I think we have almost 6 of them going right now, so we'll make sure to keep you up to date with that, and if there's delays, you'll be aware of that as well.
Questions from board members? Hearing none, the recommendation, please.
Dr. Rios, the only question I have, are we going to value engineer or defer out the flooring until next budget?
Yes, sir. That's our recommendation, just as discussed.
Okay. It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve request for competitive proposal, RFP number 19-05, dining hall renovations at Del Rio High School for Frontera Construction LLC, and authorize superintendent of schools to sign a contract for services in the amount not to exceed $780,400.
Okay, you've heard the recommendation. I'll entertain a motion for approval. Mr. Contreras, is there a second? Mr. Overfeld, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your right hand. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
This time, we're down to item 15, Human Resources. Consideration to approve the updates to the 2018-2019 District Compensation Plan. Ade Garcia.
Mr. Mesa, Ms. Garcia is going to put the slide up there, and I'm going to review it for the board.
And Sandra is going to give you a copy.
And this is a discussion and approval item.
Mr. Mesa, members of the board, over the last couple of weeks, some board members have asked about the salary for the summer school employees, particularly the cafeteria ladies. We ran the numbers, and I have to first say that as this administration and this board have never recommended a salary increase for just one group unless we've identified that group for being woefully under market value. And as such, 6 years ago, we did have an increase just for skilled laborers. 6 years later, they're again under market value. But what we've done is that we've gone in and counted all the summer school employees, whether they be teachers or bus drivers or cafeteria workers. We've estimated $622,000 to run this year's summer school program. And then we calculated what a 5% increase, a 7.5% increase, 10%, 15, and 20% increase will cost in additional funds. And you can see the variance there being anywhere from $31,000 to $124,000. All of this is within this budget. I visited with our budget coordinator and our chief financial officer to review money that had been previously allocated but not used. And we did identify a couple of areas. At this point, the money that we've identified falls right around $70,000. I'm in agreement that we haven't increased our summer school rates in more than 10 years. So I would definitely encourage the board to consider the summer school rate increase for everyone because we've identified the $70,000 that we're not going to use this year. And specifically, that $70,000 is the money that we had set aside should we need to provide for attorney fees to keep fighting the Valverde appraisal district issues that we've had. It's not going to happen this year. So we have that $70,000 available. I think it would be appropriate to do 20%, just because it's been so many years, at least 10 years, probably 15 years. But I'm not so sure that it would be a prudent thing based on what we can afford. But I am mindful of the fact that we haven't given an increase. We would, if it was left to us to make a recommendation, we would recommend the 10% across the board increase for summer school employees. Mr. Mesa, do you all have questions?
I'll open it up to board members. Mr. Contreras.
Of course, I'm not in agreement for the 10%. However, I think the question at this point was, from what my understanding was, that the rate of summer school was far less than that of regular school year. For that specifically, so when we give the summer school increase, will it be equivalent to the regular school year?
No, sir. Let me pull up the presentation that was made by Luz. do you still have that there, Isaiah?
Yes,
I want to look, for example, look at the cafeteria workers and what their starting salary is right now. Or starting hourly rate is. Can you go to that?
And the reason that came about, to my understanding, was because the work is the same. And in some cases, the workload is heavier because there's less of them to do the work.
Yeah. We talked about this last week.
Do you want to see this one right here?
What page are you on, ma'am?
I am on page number?
It'll be at the bottom. You have to scroll
41.
a little bit more. What is it?
41.
Page 41. Okay. So we look at page 41.
Under pay grade
I
2.
think on ours is page 40 for food service worker.
Mhm.
It does have the minimum pay at $10 an hour. The recommendation would be for at 10% would be $11 an hour. Where's my? Is that correct, ma'am? Yes.
Yes, you have
So
a
in
copy
this
right
case, it would be $1 above. The minimum pay would be at $1. Now, granted, you have ladies that have been working in the cafeteria, for example, for a whole lot of years. So $11 still doesn't approach what they're making right now, but it is more than the minimum. And that is the case for everybody. You could have a teacher that's worked 35 years or 30 years and paying them $35 an hour comes nowhere near what they're making. But it is an increase.
Any other question?
It would be good to give them $12, 20%. Also, the question was the big difference between $18 that the manager makes and the $10 that the workers make.
Yes, I'm so glad that you brought that up, ma'am, because the pay for the, bring me to the pay for the manager, Ms. Garcia.
Should be paid 38.
Pay grade 5. You have elementary, pay grade 4, and then middle school and high school.
What page is that?
That's the same page.
40,
40 on your packet, 41 on this one.
40 on my packet. Okay, and the food service manager is what pay grade?
Food service manager for elementary and freshman is pay grade 4, and it's 192 days, so it's $13.19, the starting salary.
So you can see that for the food service manager, the pay that they're getting in the summer is well above even the midpoint. Therefore, my recommendation for increase does not address or include the food service manager, because unlike 100% of the other positions, they're already being paid above the midpoint.
That's a lot, way above the midpoint, $18. We talked about this at the last meeting, but that was the discrepancy. So 12 or 11, probably 12, I think would be more.
Well, okay.
20%, but then you have to give everybody that, except for this food service manager?
Everybody except the food service manager, but at 20%, which would be the $12 an hour, we've only found additional money above the 70,000. The board would have to allocate money from fund balance. And I just don't recommend that at this point. But I can't make that recommendation because it's not fiscally in line with what we've done in the past. But the board can make that recommendation. I'm prepared to recommend 10%, and I feel comfortable with that. I don't agree with it. I don't disagree with a 20% increase. I think it's been a whole lot of years. But with just having a week to prepare for this, we identified 70,000 from the legal fees that we were putting aside. We identified $20,000 left from the TRE. And remind me of the other 20,000, ma'am?
There's 20,000 in the IR campuses.
On the IR campuses that we had enough funds from grant money, that wasn't necessary. So I don't have, 124. I have 93,000, if y'all wanted to do 15%.
I have a couple of questions before we go on to that. It's my understanding that this has not been revised since 10 years,
More, sir.
more than 10 years.
Yes, sir.
And the other question I had was, when I first brought this item up, it had to do with food service, summer, elementary, cafeteria manager, for example. And I was told you cannot increase for one person, you have to do it across the board. And now we're saying if we increase it, we're going to exclude the cafeteria manager because they're already at $18 an hour, correct?
They are well above the midpoint, and everybody else is barely at the minimum. Because something was done before, probably even before this board, in 10, 12 years ago, where they specifically increased the summer pay schedule for a cafeteria manager, but didn't do everybody else. And that was, this is just an action to correct what was done inappropriately as many years ago.
So I guess my question goes back again. We're doing it for everyone except the cafeteria manager.
Yes, sir, that was the study that we conducted.
It was my understanding that we couldn't do it for one, we had to do it for all.
It's not a rule, it's just what we've always done. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can understand, you know, Mrs. Gonzalez's point, you know, when you go from $10 to $11, and it's been over 10 years, I don't know how many years since that they've had an increase. I would like to see it at $12. Now, not necessarily for everyone else, but
No, because apparently everybody else is making what they're supposed to be, what other people make? Is that what you're saying on the summer school?
no, ma'am, nobody's pay has been increased.
No, I'm saying as far as this salary study that you had, they're not making the same?
No-
Cafeteria managers making more than anybody else?
Yes, cafeteria managers comparatively are making significantly more money than everybody else. If you consider that the summer school rate of pay for an instructional aide who's required to have an associate's degree is $12 an hour. But a cafeteria manager makes $6 an hour above that. It's just a whole lot. Something went wrong 15 years ago when this was done, or 12 years ago, but it was definitely before any of us were probably here.
I was probably here, but and you've got some up here. Field monitors no longer here, right? You don't have one of those? Okay, but anyway, it's $18 is a lot to me. Anyway, I would like the $12. That's Ms. Gonzalez's wish.
So we have,
Mr. Overfelt.
yes, sir. So if we went with the 10%, you're saying that on our spreadsheet here, food service manager will not go to 1980, it will stay capped at $18?
Yes.
But everyone else on there will go to, or bus drivers will go to 1320, or parental aides will go to 1210, etc. Yes.
Can I ask Amy to come to the front? I just have a point of clarification, because again, we've only been working through this the last week, and we had a long holiday. Ma'am, some of the salaries are, I guess we had considered paying some from federal funds, but federal funds was just well over budget.
Correct.
So all of summer school, for all positions, is being paid with local funds?
No, sir. The summer school, the programs that are happening, the promotional, which there's an elements, there's an
SSI.
elementary and the secondary, those are out of Fund 211.
And bilingual?
Everything else will be out of general.
Even bilingual is gonna be out of
Yes,
general?
sir.
Which in the past it hasn't, correct?
Correct.
So even for the programs that are coming out of bilingual, we would be mixing local funds and 211 funds
Correct.
to be able to pay.
To pay for all the
right. And
summer
we're
school.
okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, one more question. If we reallocate the 70,000 from the legal fees, the 20,000 from the TRE, the 20,000 from the IR campuses, if the board chose to do the 20%, would there be 14,000 in salary favorability?
Yes, sir.
Then my follow-up to that is, well, maybe I lost my train of thought, but the 14,000 you mentioned right there, that does not require us to come back in June to do a budget amendment?
No, I would make the recommendation for everything, including the budget amendment, at this time.
At this
As
time.
part of the agenda,
Okay.
if that's, if that's the wishes of the board. I don't disagree that summer school employees should make more money, and it hasn't been done in as many years. I just like to be cautious, again, because we've only studied this 5 days and really today.
Discussion, board members?
I'll just say this, I'm fine at 10% because of the 70,000 in favorability. They're pushing to 20, I'm gonna have a hard time on that, but again, whatever the majority of the board goes with.
Any increase is good for employees at this point.
What is it? Excuse me?
Any increase is good for employees, and
I think so
it hasn't
too. I
been
mean, I don't
revisited.
understand. I didn't see what the incentive was to work in summer school if I was gonna pay less. I don't get it, but that's me.
I think the hard thing to understand is if it's done for one person, it has to be done for all categories. It increases the cost to $92,000, whatever it was.
Amy, you can't find us the additional $54,000?
Mr. Contreras?
I'm fine with, if we could give them the 20%, obviously, it would be great, but if all we could find is the 70, then the 10% would be it. We're not gonna risk anything else and take a chance.
And 10% is good.
I can,
Or even the 15, because you do have
50 cents.
the additional, right? You had 70 and then 20, I believe. So that puts it right on that, right, 93, so that'd be 53, 15 without.
yes, sir. We can do it. Y'all just need to,
The
feel
15% would be 50 cents less than 12, I think, right? Is my math good?
yes,
So 15% is doable.
yes.
Little more.
Is there a motion to
I'm gonna
increase
have 12.
summer school employees by 15%?
Mr. Massa?
Yes.
Because we need to do the budget amendment, I'd have to read it to specifically say where the money's coming from. If you'll just tell me what you want me to do. Is that correct, Amy? So can I do
Correct.
everything in one motion?
Yes.
Are y'all fine with 15%?
Yeah, well, I guess so, 50 cents less. Okay.
Overall. Now, we have to, I'm not picking on the cafeteria managers, but they are, this won't even bring everybody else close to the average of what they're making. That's why I have to exclude them. Okay? Ms. Johnson, are we okay with this? I always look for her approval. It just means a lot to me. Okay, are we ready? Mr. Mess, is that okay if I read it?
We're ready.
Okay. Let me just make my notes here. The 70,000 is the insurance committed fund, right?
The legal fees.
Legal fees. And the 20,000 is from leftover TRE money,
TRE,
right?
yes, sir.
So we're gonna reallocate committed funds, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. It is a recommendation of the administration that the board approve changes to the district compensation plan to include a 15% raise for summer school employees with the exception of cafeteria managers, and that they authorize the reallocation of fund balance committed funds to cover the 15% raise, specifically $70,000 committed for legal fees, $20,000 remaining in the TRE election, and $20,000 from money set aside to assist campuses in need of improvement, for a total fund balance amendment from committed funds of $110,000.
You've heard the recommendation from administration. Is there a motion for approval? Mr. Contreras, is there a second? Mr. Overfelt, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your right hand. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have updated the district compensation plan. We have no items under 16. We go to item 17, closed session. The time is 8:04 p.m. The board will go into closed session pertaining to sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.073, 551.074, 551.076, 551.082, 551.084, 551.087 of the Texas Code, Texas Open Meetings Act. If a final vote is required, it will be done in open session. We are now in closed session. Okay, the time is 8:49 p.m. We reconvene into open session. No action was taken in closed session. At this time, we're on item 18. Consideration to approve personnel report to include the following: new hires, district vacancies, retirements, resignations. Ade Garcia.
Yes, sir. It is the recommendation of administration for the Board of Trustees to approve the following new hire: Sierra Pyle, first grade teacher for North Heights Elementary; Julissa Cortinas, fifth grade teacher for North Heights Elementary; and Yasmin Hernandez, bilingual ESL strategist for Buena Vista Elementary.
You've heard the recommendation from the administration. Is there a motion for approval? Mr. Contreras, seconded by Mr. Overfelt. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your right hand. Motion carries unanimously. There being no other items on the agenda, I will call for adjournment.
Mr. Mesa, just one quick.
Yes.
I know in the previous one, we were talking about the summer school rates. In the recommendation, it talked about TRE money. And for the record, I just wanted to clarify and get the superintendent to clarify that that was TRE money that was going to pay for the election, and it was not actual money raised from the TRE. Correct, sir?
That's
Dr. Overfelt? Dr. Overfelt. Dr. Reeves.
that is correct. The money that we set aside to pay for the election is the money that we recommended be moved over to pay for this raise, the leftover money from the election. The money that's been gained from the tax swap or the TRE, that we said was specifically for construction, and for security, and we have not touched that money for anything else other than that. So you're correct. Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Overfeld.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Orfeld. I think that's a very important point. Any other motion for adjournment? Mr. Orfeld, seconded by Mr. Contreras. All those in favor indicate by raising your right hand. Motion carries. Good night, everyone.